Sometimes you can glean a great deal from a name. Concord, the new hero shooter from PlayStation Studios' new team Firewalk Studios, has some similarities with the looming, expensive supersonic aeroplane. The studio was founded in 2018 and acquired by Sony in 2022. A big CGI reveal demonstrated a Destiny/Overwatch meets Guardians of the Galaxy persona, accompanied with a bright, pastel-shaded modern computer graphic design. From a gameplay design and template perspective, it falls in line with the craze of 2016 to 2020 for neat, tidy, bright, fast and wide heroes to pick from and shoot at. Team Fortress and its sequel really started it all, but we had previously older versions such as Fur Fighters, but Battleborn and Overwatch were the headline grabbers that caused the market to be swamped. Now, thanks to Sony for sending me a closed beta code and then the open beta last weekend, I gave the game a full test across PS5 and PC, which aside some more maps, weapons and DLC and such aspects I will cover at the end, this is close to what the full game will run like come launch later this month. Now, PlayStation 5 visuals and resolution first then. From a PC settings perspective, PS5 looks to be at maximum, which are so minimal in difference, it really is a mute conversation. The art is bright and tonal with a clean but shaded style to surfaces and objects. It's built using Epic's Unreal Engine 5, and this means a great basis for materials, lighting, shadows, particles and such. And of course we struggle to get a bad looking game on the engine, image quality notwithstanding mind, which is true here. Objects have a solid and detailed look. Brick, cloth, skin, brass all have sufficient light propagation to convince. Maps are well lit with a mix of light sources and shadows to create an individual style to each. Global illumination bounce hits your weapons and hands as you run through certain sections, although a very static world, largely lit by sun, moon or other single sources, it has a definite Destiny vibe to it, albeit with a much brighter, cleaner rainbow light colour palette. Characters are probably the best visual point though, with the pre-rendered CGI story segments using the same assets as the in-game ones. These are well animated, emotive, and with the engine's excellent per pixel motion blur, look and move brilliantly both in-game and with the first person view on guns and hands. But the best is in the roster picker at the start of each match. Some of the team came from game and movie production, and you can see this crossover best here in the models and film-like quality and style they have. However, this is not a standout anymore, and due to the fact the actual gameplay models are usually lower LODs and further away, they look far more standard in action. Compounding the low overall impact the visuals and levels have is the fact they are very static, flat, and largely just a square room with warrens running through them all into kill boxes, crisscross highs and low segments, or a focal point each one converges at.
Throwing a smoke screen.
Shadows, although good quality, are mostly static, and even moving objects such as bunting have a static map with no motion. This, along with almost zero world interaction and physics, leaves a game that feels very old in comparison to 2-generation old titles, such as the excellent DICE Battlefield 4, which ran on the PS3 360 with visual quality, PBR-based materials, vehicles, physics, destruction, and vastly larger maps and player counts than this game. And at 60 FPS on PS4 and certainly Pro and Xbox One X, here on the PS5 and PC, this is of Call of Duty Destiny levels of interaction, and again reinforces that this was a clear aim from the team's inception. Now, this is also true of the PC release, which shares identical visuals and quality at the maximum settings, just with options to extend higher resolution, frame rates, and the full suite of reconstruction and interpolation options. A good selection of options, in fact, but more of a plug-and-play menu to pick from the team, with the engine supporting native TAA, TSR, DLSS, FSR3, and XESS, which, due to the game's art style, low to no foliage and sub-pixel details, is still clean and sharp at 1440p or higher.
Deploying smoke grenade.
You do get some shimmer on thin elements such as grates and when depth of field is used on backgrounds when using FSR and even DLSS, but DLSS again is the best, but aside comparisons they all look pretty close to similar levels at the same target output resolutions. Lower end PCs will need to drop resolution though, as the game can become GPU bound due to this, even on my RX 6800 at 1440p native. Moving into performance, 60 FPS for an online FPS is a standard option now, and really should be what you expect at the bare minimum, and it hits that well here. As a beta, this is always possible that improvements will come, but it is mostly a locked and stable 16 millisecond refresh with no other options. Now within the closed and open beta at least, so 120 FPS is off the cards for console owners, but not for the engine, as it is able to go higher than this on PC, both with the DLSS and FSR3 frame generation options available. Something useful here, as it can become bizarrely CPU bound even on my Zen 5600X CPU. This may also be the case of some dips under 60 FPS on PS5 as well, with it dipping a frame or two on certain maps whilst running around, and it can also dip into the low 50s with large alpha effects such as explosions, volume like smoke, and 3 or more characters on screen. These are short-lived, always within the next 33 millisecond refresh, but they do show areas the team could improve here. Now the PS5 looks to use FSR with the same flickering issues noted when PC uses the same settings, and this appears to be a dynamic solution with counts changing from approximately 3840 by 2160, which is the reconstruction target, down to 2259 by 1271. Now it likely scales to 1660p high native and shifts as needed between these points. We can see that on my RX 6800 GPU, even with 1440p, it can dip to similar or lower levels than PS5, but it can also go higher than that with higher frame rates, so this would align with GPU expectations. PC is a mix though, and highlights more issues with the game and certainly memory and CPU demands. Currently, it does not work at all on the Steam Deck, with it not being able to start due to missing functionality, which is a large potential market for the game, and I assume it would perform badly at present anyway. Tested on my RTX 4050 laptop, which highlights the CPU and memory demands best, we struggle to lock to a smooth frame time on any map. And even using 1440p DLSS balance with a 120 FPS target, we're clearly CPU then and or memory bound by the 6GB of VRAM, and the game is page swapping all the time as you run around. This streaming in and out of map data makes the PC in this beta borderline unplayable, as the game can stutter for upwards of 300 milliseconds, and this feels horrible to play, and with the mouse and keyboard I simply couldn't play it. Even lowering settings and using frame generation makes no impact, as this adds even more memory demands, and the game is simply waiting on render work, so this is a no-no in its current guise on this machine. I hope the team work hard to heavily optimize the game's memory use, temporary buffers, and certainly DX12 API use, as to push out such a large portion of your accessible market for a 100% online focused title that will live and die by its player base. This is not a good start.
Throwing smoke. No target. Need a second to fix myself up. Deploying smoke grenade. Healing up. Watch my back.
My 16GB RX 6800 fares much better, and was my preferred platform to play the game on, in fact, simply because I could run the game into the 100 FPS range, and here it becomes almost 100% CPU bound, which again is a shock and something the team should address, as 120 FPS should be possible on such a relatively simple game design, player count and map size. That said, a close lock to 60 FPS using max settings at 1440p does play great with mouse and keyboard and controller, and fluidity offered by boosting this to 120 FPS without frame generation at 1440p FSR3 balanced made the game feel much more responsive and precise. And I hope the team certainly look to integrate a high performance mode on PS5 using VRR and a 1080p lower bounds base to get into the 90s, which would help the game's input latency, which is much better on PC due to this, It's not up there with the mighty COD levels just yet, but it's certainly better than what it currently stands at 60 FPS.
No one will mourn you.
Now, gameplay is the weakest area in my opinion. On the one hand, I get the aim here to create a team-focused raid-style game. Each character has their own unique traits, some faster with the dash boost to evade enemies, snipers with two-shot kills, Hulk-like tanks with strong defense and powerful attacks, and tactics come from the team's mixed skills. Drop a tracer to identify enemies on a capture the flag mode, build walls to create a kill box to force enemies into, drop a health pack to maintain teammates, as you can only heal via map pickups, drop packs from teams, or some characters have a self-heal option. Others can drop a teleport pod to quickly walk back to that point when under fire, or fly up when needed to make aiming harder, and you can use a dash and roll mechanism to give you a quick speed, which I used often with this character being my main one, because I found it easy when you get attacked from all sides. You can sometimes save yourself by literally dashing out of the way. The problem is many games and teams just run off and you're then playing a single style, making the best choice normally the one with the best mix of speed, precision and firepower. Map design also falls down here, as although not big, they are often too big for the 5v5 max the game sets a limit at. Worse still is if you leave during play, with some games becoming 5v1, meaning you can spend minutes of a map running around trying to find someone to shoot at and often miss the battles or be shot in the back. Verticality is almost non-existent, with at most some offering a high vantage point on a central path route, but this becomes an easy camping spot for snipers or a kill room if the entire team sit inside and get stormed. The skills are not diverse enough across the 16 heroes, and many of them are themes of the same, and in reality the split of types is around 5. Fast but weak, strong but slow, powerful but limited ammo, agile and flight but medium power, and then a mix of these across the rest. They all look very generic from a design perspective, and none stand out as recognisable 5 minutes after you finish the game. It would have been much better to be more extreme with the designs to cater for a wider audience, as, in my opinion at least, the point of a hero shooter is you pick the one you like the look of first, but then gravitate to the one that matches your play style best, or at least the game type. The colour schemes, both on characters and maps, hinders this more though, with all being shades of purple, orange, red, and some look very similar. I did find myself thinking at times if this was the same map or not. Not enough maps or game types to pick from across both weekends. I could spend 5 minutes looking for a match on the ranked sections, and the rival games are the best, but if you die early on, they can be very slow drain to the next match. As such, the group capture the flag or straight team deathmatch with card collection are the go-to games because they're the fastest to play, most energetic, and allow you to change characters and tests very quickly. Although with only one character per team per game, you can find your favourite is taken quickly, forcing you to pick another closest to them or just test out the rest.
Sniper, fight me!
Coming fresh on the back of another hero shooter in Justice League Kill the Suicide Squad, this also feels very late to the party. It's not a bad looking game with good use of textures, materials and lighting, with some GI bounce and shadow maps, but most are baked in, it seems. From a technical perspective, I would have expected this to be 120 FPS out of the box on PS5 based on the player count and map design. The static world lacks flair, excitement and style, and the characters, although never bad, are more nondescript and thus fail to make a big or lasting impression. The weapons and abilities do not create enough diversity to shake up most games, and the time to kill can be very slow to instant based on the level of each, which can make for some frustrating moments. Slow game loop and map design that fails to deliver tight, fast-paced combat or high tactical distance-based play means it misses both ends of the gameplay spectrum. The score sheet at the end of the game highlights it best for me. Not being clear on what each column is, trying to reward all players for taking part rather than winning or being strong in certain areas, and ultimately falling into the classic trap of trying to please everyone and end up pleasing no one. Although not a bad performer on PS5 or PC, it certainly performs worse than what many, including myself, would have expected, and I feel a far wider array of maps, gameplay modes and player versus player count should be a focus early on from the team to increase player base. A 120 FPS mode on consoles and improved CPU memory use could be a quick win for headline-grabbing news, with the promise of regular weekly story segments and marketing animated clips on social media show that the team certainly have the time and budget to focus on getting those players on board, but I feel their focus is on the wrong end of that player engagement slider. Instead, I hope we see a ton of updates to the core gameplay loop and choice close to launch to pack this out with more PvP and more map types to play to ensure that this Concord does not fly high and then come crashing down to earth like its namesake. And that's it for a technical review of Concord on PS5 and PC. Are you looking forward to this game come the end of August? Are you not? What did you like? What did you not like about the game? Did you even download and play the open beta when it was available? Leave all your thoughts and feedbacks down below. And remember, I am self-funded and independent, so you can help grow this channel and my work by liking, sharing, commenting down below, which helps all those engagement numbers, which I hate saying, but it's the only way that I can grow this channel. And obviously you can support me over on Patreon for exclusive and early access to content. Anyway, that's it for now. I'm out, but I will be back very soon on the very next video with more information to drop, and I'll catch you on that one.